Wonder if everyone could take their seats. We're going to go ahead and start. Thank you. Here I am blabbing my mouth. Okay. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If everyone will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Are we going to do the Matthew telephone first? Oh, Matthew.
Well, we'll call the roll first. Yeah, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Alderman Matthew.
Here.
Alderman Sage.
Here.
Alderman Malumway.
Here.
Alderman Burgess.
Here.
Alderman Painter.
Here.
Alderman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Black.
Here.
Alderman Harmon.
Here.
Alderman Bray.
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here.
What about Jamie?
Jamie?
Yes, sir.
You're there. Okay, if we could go ahead and start with it, could we have a motion to authorize Alderman Matthey to participate virtually because he is away on business?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Second.
There were a lot of seconds, but I think I saw Alderman Sage's light up. Was that a second, Alderman Sage? It was, but I think okay, I'll give Alderman Sage the second on that one. And at this point, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Sage.
Yes.
Alderman Malumway.
Yes.
Alderman Burgess.
Yes.
Alderman Painter.
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt.
Yes.
Alderman Black.
Yes.
Alderman Harmon.
Yes.
Alderman Bray.
Yes.
Okay. Jamie, you're good to go. Okay?
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, and we have a motion, Alderwoman Schmidt.
Yes, I want to make a motion that changes our agenda. This is with regard to item 8C, which is the Memorandum of Understanding regarding the BCPA. We realized earlier today that when we talked about this Memorandum of Understanding that we actually had agreement among the council, that a motion I made actually asked us to put this on either a committee of the whole or a work session. So first I would like to move that we move up item 8C, the MOU with the BCPA, on the agenda and have it considered now for the purpose of tabling it to a future meeting.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Alderwoman Painter. Any discussion of that motion? Okay. If you would go ahead and vote. Alderman Matthey, how do you vote on that?
Affirmative.
Okay, so the motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk, and that will be, the motion to table has been passed.
And
okay.
then there's a second part to that, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Now that we've gone ahead and done that, in accordance with the previous motion that we made to have this item tabled to a work session or committee of the whole, I move to table consideration of the Memorandum of Understanding with the BCPA to a work session that will be held on March the 12th, 2018.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Alderwoman Painter. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, go ahead and vote on that motion. Alderman Matthey?
Affirmative.
Okay. That motion passes 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. All right. Thank you very much. Now, at this point, we have a couple of recognitions. There are two appointments. One, Gary McGinnis. Is Gary here to the Bloomington Human Relations Commission? Gary, thank you for your willingness to serve. Appreciate that. And Robert Garcia to the Property Maintenance Review Board. Thank you so much. Thank you for your willingness to serve. At this point, we have public comment, and I'm not going to count, obviously, this time again on that, but we have up to 30 minutes, and you can have up to 3 minutes apiece. Given that we have more than 10 people, we would ask you to be as expeditious as possible, and if possible, obviously the floor is yours, but to not perhaps repeat in too much detail what maybe someone else has already said. If you are, and if some of you are here from the Hedgewood subdivision and some other areas are concerned about the particular property that might or might not be developed, one of the updates is the participation that would be would be potentially legally binding. If I'm looking at my attorney to make sure that I'm saying this correctly, would be at a possible liquor commission hearing, and that's what I would encourage you to attend. Anything that could be said here is fine, but it is just part of our public comment. In public comment, we do not respond to public comment. We also just want to remind everyone that I do have an open house every other week, and we can, I can get questions answered. But if you're here for that particular issue, the information that's binding, I as a liquor commissioner, when I hear, let's say, 8 people, I'm just picking a number from the audience, who happen to live in an area who are opposed to it, and let's say nobody is in favor of it from the area, that is clear and substantial evidence. That's my terminology. Is that a fair statement, or is there something that I've maybe overstated, Mr. Juergens?
That they apply for a liquor license, that'll come back before.
Correct. This is not, there's not, a liquor license is necessary for video poker. Right, just so that everybody understands. You don't get the liquor license, you don't get the video poker. And correct. Just to clarify all of those things, because it may very well be that there are people here for those reasons, and it doesn't mean you can't speak. It's just giving you a little bit of context on that, because I am a little concerned that we may not get to everyone. So if you can summarize your thoughts in less than 3 minutes, we would certainly greatly appreciate that. All right. One other thing, just because we have and I'm not counting this against public comment, we have a former mayor, Mayor Jesse Smart, in the audience, and former councilman Jim Fruin in the audience. Thank you. They have very long-standing service to our community, and we want to thank both of you. And Judy Stearns, who's just walked in the door as well. Okay, thank you all for your service. At this point, we have, we'll start at 7:08, so we go to 7:38, and I'll announce these in groups of 3. William Rao, Jesse Smart, and Donna Bolin.
Mayor Renner, council members, and Mr. Rasmussen, recent meetings with council members have detailed half a dozen initiatives which taken together might save the city up to $1 million.
Bill, would you move the microphone towards you? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Okay. I've detailed about half a dozen initiatives which taken together might save the city up to $1 million, perhaps $1.5 million per year. If all were to pass muster, they could reduce the deficit by 1/3 to 1/2. Alas, none of these initiatives are possible. Given their financial structure, payback on such projects always requires more than 1 year. A precondition for a business deal is a multi-year contract, and city policy prohibits multi-year contracts. What does this mean? It means that we are forced to run a city of 78,000 people as if it were an early 20th century cash in, cash out moms and pops grocery store. It means that department chairs are forced to sign a single-year contract that precludes multi-year contracts that involve more competition and lower costs. I don't know the history of this policy. There was no doubt good reason and good intent behind it. Perhaps there were costly mistakes in multi-year contracts. The ban may have solved this problem, but its across-the-board imposition has given rise to other more serious problems. I therefore request that you review this policy and explore more flexible alternatives. There is a second concern. Some citizens doubt the city's ability to spend their tax dollars wisely. They might object to any changes. This concern also has a solution. Several energy service companies, what are called ESCOs, have expressed an interest in doing business with Bloomington. These companies are experts at slashing utility bills and other city expenses. ESCOs can provide turnkey solutions, saving cities and schools hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars per year. Energy-saving contracts represent classic win-win public-private partnerships. In about 2 months' time, an ESCO can develop a free-of-charge business case with ballpark estimates of the savings Bloomington would get under a contract. With a green light to proceed, one ESCO then completes an investment-grade audit, after which they will legally guarantee, let me stress that, legally guarantee so many hundred thousands of dollars in savings per year for the life of the contract. My second request then is that you empower Mr. Rasmussen and his staff to initiate one or more business case studies by ESCOs. He can then bring to you and to the citizenry the dollars and cents savings that this kind of multi-year contract provides. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Jesse Smart, and then Donna Bolin, and then Judy Stearns.
Take up a little of your time. I'm Jesse Smart. I'm here tonight as president of the Homeowners Association at Prairie Vista, and strictly to thank your city manager and Parks and Rec director for getting things underway for the 18th hole at Prairie Vista Golf Course. I think that'll help solve some of your revenue problems, because I've had so many people that don't live out there. Of course, for those of us who live there don't golf like the people from other places, but they say that we get that fixed, they'll be playing there a lot more. So anyway, I think it's going to be a good investment for the city, and I just wanted to know that we as the neighborhood thank the two individuals that I just mentioned, city manager and parks director, for all their work to put it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Bolin, Judy Stearns, and Scott Steimerling.
I'm Donna Bolin. I live in Ward 2. This is going to be about the budget, and I'm very thankful for Mr. Rasmussen. He's been doing a wonderful job, and I'm very thankful for Mr. Karsh, because he's been pushing for years to get the streets funded. And also Patty Lynn, because she also does a wonderful job here, and she's been saying over and over for years that revenue is flat and usage is down, and nobody's paying attention. I have a recommendation to save money by defunding the nonprofits. They already receive tax benefits, and instead of funding them, I think that you should personally go out and support them and solicit support of your friends. Okay, and I'm also going to ask, where is Streets 2.0? The sewer tax, or the sewer rates were increased to allow street repair, and the motor fuel tax was asked to be increased. My concern about the motor fuel tax was I don't want to lose the long-range truckers. I want to make sure they come in, because that's out-of-town revenue that we can use. And I don't know if you're aware that administrative fees are taken out of the sewer fund to administer, I guess. It concerns me that the council will hesitate to raise the motor fuel tax, but will consider hiring people for the BCPA. And I'm just wondering priorities. Please reduce funding for economic development and apply that to roads. We would not have $3 million deficit, but for the purchase of $3 million of land downtown. The TIF district's balance is negative. Quality of roads reflect the quality of city leadership. The liquor license fees were for the police, and I'm wondering if there's revenue over expenses on that and where that revenue went. I want you to whenever you decide on something, I would like you to take into consideration the fiscal impact, which is the cost of this to the city, rather than just the economic impact. You say that you cannot continue to cut, and I say you can cut salary and benefits, and I say you cannot continue to raise taxes because the tax base is diminishing, and I refer you again to this Lafler curve. We are on this side. Growth is going down, the tax base is going down. We need to cut as much as possible, down to the bone. After observing the council for 4 budget cycles and the budget task force, I'm very disappointed in the performance of the council so far. I tend to tie people to what they've done in the past to what they will do in the future, and hopefully...
I'm sorry, Donna, your time's up.
Okay, hopefully I will see better.
Okay. Judy Stern, Scott Steimerling, and Doug Schnitker. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Thank you. I'm here about the alderman's comments from last council meeting. It was a little rough listening to it. I finally found out what would outrage the council, what would engage them, and it turns out that the mayor's comments that perhaps you were celebrating tabling the, the welcoming ordinance, that was an outrageous thing. And were you surprised when there was a very unpleasant exchange between Mayor Renner and Alderman Painter? Did that surprise you? It shouldn't have. Because if you were here in April of 2014, you remember a very, very vicious and aggressive and long-winded bullying attack on the 4th Ward alderman, which didn't impress any of you, which wasn't even comment-worthy, wasn't even noteworthy. I guess they came for the 4th Ward alderman, and that was okay, because I wasn't the 4th Ward alderman. Shortly after that, we heard or we read the prepared written remarks to a local blogger that she was, quote, a human piece of garbage, and that's a compliment, and please quote me. We heard that, too. And the excuse that she had attacked his son, you weren't interested in knowing whether that was true or not. You weren't even interested in discussing it. A quick censure, and on we go. And on we go to what we now have today. Recently, there was a letter in the paper. Some of you may have seen it. It wasn't written by just, Joe Blow on the street, so to speak. It was Guy and Ruth Ann Fraker. Guy is known, nationally certainly, as a Lincoln Scholar. And Ruth Ann held office many years as township supervisor, quite honorably, here in the city and the township of Bloomington. And they said something very serious about the state that this council and this mayor has reached. And what they said is, it's gone beyond embarrassing. It's now disgraced. You have disgraced the city. And I agree with them 100%. And this council, those of you who were here, you all sat by and watched. And were you interested? Were you interested when that horrific attack occurred on me? Scott, you had to intervene. I think Kevin Lauer intervened. A few people were shocked. But what happened? Absolutely nothing. We are here today for a reason. You all know the quote, they came for the Jews and I wasn't a Jew. Yeah, they came for the alderman, they came after a local blogger, somebody came and viciously attacked and abused. And it wasn't you, so it was okay. Okay, and then they came for you, finally, at a microaggression something or other. And then you were interested, but there was no one left to speak out. And even if there was someone left, there was no one left.
Okay, thank you. Scott Steimerling and Doug Schnitker.
Scott Steimerling, Ward 4. My concern is 2 things. With the streets, I've brought this up before, and I wish that the gas tax money and the money earmarked by the city for roads would go into the roads and not spend it elsewhere. Do the right thing, do it right the first time, and quit doing it over. It's a patch job that's not going to hold. I'm embarrassed for anyone to see the streets, how they're maintained, and a good share of the blame goes with this council and the past councils. not to mention the former administration. I guess it concerns me that the mayor unfortunately does not, unfortunately won another term, but not by the landslide that he'd like some people to believe. The former city manager had a solid door with no windows, and he shut that up so no one could see what was being done on the inside. Indirectly, we're paying the cost of the city's share of resurfacing the streets by taxes and home rule taxes, sales taxes, and you can't get enough. It seems like you spent every lousy dime that you get, and when the small car hits a pothole, it does quite a bit of damage. Yet the city trucks are the ones, some of them, that are causing the damage, and not as much as construction trucks. I don't see the city doing anything about it except patching it up after people scream loud enough. The sidewalks, the condition of the sidewalks is a tripping hazard. I would think that the city would take care of the streets and sidewalks and stop raising taxes. If they have to, take it out of your entertainment fund, Terry. I know that this is not popular with you, and I'm not popular, and I really don't care. The last time you shut me off. Thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, Doug, and then Robert Bosquez and Glenn Ludwig.
Thank you, and I'll keep this brief as well. I'm, like former Mayor Smart, I'm the past president of the Prairie Vista Men's Golf Association, and I'm here to express our support for reopening the 18th tee as it was designed. And thinking of what to say here, it's kind of like a good book. We've ruined the ending on the book, and when you finish the day, you leave with kind of a sad taste in your mouth. So it would be great if we could restore that and give it the ending that it deserves. Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much, Doug. Robert Bosquez and Glenn Ludwig and Leon Cabe. Okay.
Thank you. My comments, I come today to urge you, City Council, the leaders of our great community here, is to take more action against landlords, especially the landlord on the apartments of the 800 and 900 block of West Grove and Front. Those apartments have been nothing but nuisance. I have family that live on Grove Street, and for years, you can ask the Bloomington Police Department, they've been collecting data on just the nuisance abatement of these apartments. I would like to bring a solution. What the solution is, I have a couple, and I'll share them with you. So if it means to go harder, tougher fines on these landlords, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. If it means that's going to shut them down, why not? Let's do it. These apartments here take up about 4 to 6 habitat homes. We can do some affordable housing there. Currently, MCCA, Project Oz, Youth Build are looking for affordable housing for young adults. This is a perfect location for it. This is a great opportunity if we can do that. What we can't do is continue to let these landlords get away with not fixing their property. There was I'm going to quote a recent article I read yesterday that disappointed me, and I quote, "If we want to be very tough on them and shut them down," I'm talking about the landlords, "then what we're doing is eliminating some of the housing opportunities for low-income residents." I disagree. So what I'm hearing, and if I'm understanding this correctly, is that you're telling low-income residents, these are the conditions you should expect. That is unacceptable. That is disappointing, and unacceptable to me. In closing, I like to end it on a positive note, but I'd like to thank the Public Works staff for their keeping our streets clean this winter with the snow, and currently furiously trying to cover up all those potholes. I want to thank them. I'd like to also thank the Bloomington Police Department for the recent arrest of the cocaine and heroin distributors in town. That's great news. And lastly, all the fire departments, especially Bloomington Fire Department, on the response to the Gettysburg apartment fires. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Ludwig, Leon, and Jim Grossman. Okay. Leon, K-A-E, Kaib. Leon. Kaib.
It's German for you.
Sorry.
Good evening, Council. My name is Leon Kaib, Ward 8, Mr. Mayor. There's 3 items that I want to try to quickly get through here. I know it's only 3 minutes, but one of the things is on Wikipedia. I bring to your attention, Wikipedia is a website, worldwide website that uses freelance articles. And Mayor Terry Renner is in the Wikipedia article. And I bring that to your attention. There is one paragraph in there. I'm going to read it to you. It says, after a purchase for a flight to Japan for his lady friend Margot Ehrlich, that she reimbursed the city for over 2 months before the trip began, Mr. Renner, or Mayor Renner, comes under investigation by Illinois State Police because of the complaint of a single person. And there's an article cited, I think, from the Panagraph. For the staff using a credit card to purchase the reimbursed plane ticket for Ms. Ehrlich, parentheses, who was an official member of the sister city delegation, close parentheses. At the City Council meeting of October 23, 2017, a letter of rebuke was given to the mayor by 6 aldermen because Renner referred to the complainant as parentheses crazy, parentheses pathetic, and there is a citation there coming from Lindsay Harrison from CI Proud. But anyway, I bring that to your attention. There is always, I'm going to show this here, revision history out of Wikipedia of all that information. And some people use pseudonyms. I personally have revised a couple things in there. And that was in November 16th and October 24th of last year. But I think it just behooves us, knowing that this is an incident in Bloomington, that the council needs to just really look into. Moving on, I know Alderman Schmidt asked for tabling of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Friends of the BCPA. I bring my public opinion to this, though it might be early now as it's tabled, but I want to recall to you, well, I'm running out of time, 6 months ago with Venue Works. They offered a bid for $3,000 a month to run BCPA, and I just want to see that you think you're going to get your dollar's worth from management here. I don't think so. So I just want you to take a look at that again, reevaluate what you're getting from that memorandum. And I guess I'll close here. I won't get to the third item, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is, again, Jim Grossman and Sue Feldkamp, and then Tony, S-G-U-R-L-A-T, Scarlata. Anyway, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, all the council members. I wrote this so that I won't run on like I usually do. So pardon me, but I'm going to just read this. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Let me be clear. I am in support of any business coming to Bloomington, Illinois, whose location is not a negative. I sent each one of you an email expressing some of my issues against the concept of the Circle K at the corner of Hershey Road and GE Road. Also, you've received an email with some in-depth research regarding gas/convenience stores. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to read that. In case you haven't been able to do so, I'd like to recap some of the information included in the research. It is strongly recommended by professional organizations that a minimum separation of 300 feet between gas pumps and sensitive land, such as daycare centers, that can't be met if this site is developed as indicated. In addition, there will be underground tanks right next to a floodplain. The research also states another concern is the effect on the health of the children at the daycare that is immediately next door to the project. Gas stations produce benzene while cars are being filled. and that is a serious threat to the health of the children as well as the adults. And as the World Health Organization states, there are no safe levels of benzene. All of these do not address the issue of probable increased crime. There is already considerable crime that can be associated with Rainbow Avenue, 1 block from this site. Add that to the data about increased crime at freestanding gas/convenience stores, and the negative statistics continue to grow. According to a report by the National Association of Convenience Stores, 71% of robberies at convenience stores involved handguns. Do we want to take the chance that this might happen immediately next door to a daycare center that was established in 1995? This data, as well as others included in the research sent to you, show this business should not be located at this intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sue Feldkamp, and Tony, again, I apologize, it's Scorlata, I believe, and then Betty Tolan.
Good evening. It's hard for me to be up here this evening because I have things to say that are not complimentary, and you all know me, and that's not my style. But because I went home from the last meeting, I was upset over things that went on. I lost a night's sleep over it. I was at Walgreens the next day. I heard people discussing it. I heard it at the grocery store, and so I've put a few notes together. When a mayor publicly badmouths his council through papers, press, and the public, then conveniently forgets what he said, that's bad practice and deception. When you interrupt a council member while she's speaking in order to hide the truth, that's deception. When you tell the press that she screeched at you, it's a lie. She didn't screech at you, she raised her voice in order to be heard. She had the floor at the time, and she wasn't able to say what she wanted to say. In these things, Terry, I worry because it shows a bad face on character, and it bothers me greatly. You also added to the press that your own interpretation of why both Karen and Johnny were angry with you. You changed their comments and their reasons to suit yourself. That's deception. When you find ways to rid yourself from someone on a commission because they don't agree with your commands, that not only shows a lack of courtesy to the people of Bloomington, but also is a deceptive practice. When you want bar tavern owners to dish out more of their income when the city already takes enough revenue from them, it's wrong. When you push a welcoming city without consideration in the facts from our police chief who has the knowledge in this, we have a real issue because then it shows that you might be caring more about the Democratic Party than being a bipartisan mayor. The police department knows what's best. If they think it's going to cause more issues and problems, we really need to listen to him. When you talk about frivolous spending, while we're almost in a $3 million deficit, we should really be questioning why we're buying lands and buildings and wanting lavish pools when you have to zigzag through the streets, weaving in and out like a drunk for the potholes. When you push a welcoming city, okay, sorry, wrong page. Finally, Terry, if you're incapable as a mayor to act on behalf of the people of the city in order for your self-interest, it's more important for those who give up their time and tax dollars. The right thing to do is step aside. And I'll leave you with this one final thought.
Yeah, your time's up. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's just one sentence. As far as the memory lapses, the truth is always easier to remember than a lie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and go to, see, is it Betty Toland? Is that correct? And then Gary Lambert. Oh, I'm sorry, Tony Scorlata. I'm sorry, Tony.
Thank you. You were very close on the name.
I was close.
Scarlatta.
Scarlett.
Just to introduce myself very quickly, my name's Tony Scarlatta. I'm the real estate development manager for Max Convenience Stores. I will be here when our petition is heard later on if the council has any questions, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then Betty and Gary Lambert, and that's maybe about all we have time for. We'll see. Betty?
My name is Betty Toland. My issue is concerning the Circle K truck stop, gas station. The proposed site map does not tell the whole picture. Pictures tell the pictures. And I've submitted things to you guys. The site is the driveway for this gas station is 30 feet from the playground of the daycare center. That's about the width of this room. You're going to have the driveway for the gas station, which is having all this traffic, the trucks, etc. And that's not healthy. Jim addressed that. The driveway is also going to make it harder for the workers and the people who go there for their egress and going into their parking lot. They already have trouble with getting in and off and on to Hershey. The Circle K is also across the street from the Hedgewood Subdivision Park. This is where the playground is for the families, for the residents of the town. And we're concerned about not only the location of the Circle K, but the message it's sending is that the gaming and gambling and loitering is okay, and this is what the city's promoting. The location of this place at Hershey and GE, it's not a gas station desert. In less than a mile away, there are 2 gas stations. Within a 1-mile radius, there are 7 gas stations. Within a 2-mile radius, there are 10 gas stations. Another Circle K is only 2.5 miles east. We don't need another gas station, especially in this location. Floodplain. When the GE Road was redesigned, the 4-lane went in, the railroad bed went down. The mayor, the residents, we were said, not one shovel of dirt should be touched or moved inside the floodplain. And the residents and contractors complied. Now the city economic developer coordinator wants to cover almost 2/3 of this lot, the GE Hershey corner lot, which has a designated floodplain, and they're going to cover it with cement and asphalt, and thus they're going to remove the surface absorption areas, and they'll increase the speed and flow of rain and snow into the Sugar Creek. And it could possibly negatively impact the properties both upstream and downstream. Street repair. The residential city streets were not built to withstand a truck stop. Surfaces at this intersection are currently deteriorating, and the picture shows that there are potholes and whatever. And so Hershey, you know, is a north-south artery. GE Road is an east-west artery, and our streets are not designed to hold this kind of truck, diesel fuel kind of truck. Another thing is our town has a plethora of gaming locations. They're in restaurants, bars, gas stations, convenience stores, clubs, private clubs, etc. They surround this part of town. We do not need another gaming site.
Your time's up. I apologize,
Thank you.
Betty. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Then we have Gary Lambert, and that's going to have to be it.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to advocate in your discussions on the garbage fees that you retain the $16 fee for the 35-gallon can. There are many households in the city with 1 and 2 occupants, many of them on pensions. I was reading through some of the information that was on the website today, and Jim Karch had a meeting with some of the employees to get their comments. One that I read said that they should do away with the 35-gallon can because many people abused it. Well, there's a simple solution for that. If the lid's up, don't pick it up. Speaking of which, I noticed at the last city council meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, and then the special meeting last week, and tonight,
2 Saturdays ago and this Saturday. So the last 5 times I've driven by this area, as you leave tonight, and you go out the parking lot there, turning right, there's 2 cans. I think one of them's a recycle can. It's for the parking deck or underneath the police parking deck. On each of those 5 occasions, those trash cans are over full with the lids up. So the city could provide a little better example. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone on the council would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Alderwoman Bray?
Yes, thank you. Item 7A and item 7I.
7A and 7I. Okay. Any other items? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exceptions of items 7A and 7I?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay, moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Mayor?
Oh.
Is that with the addendum, the items that were added?
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Terry,
Oh,
with the
thanks.
addendum.
Right, with the addendum, right. Is there a second to that motion? Moved by, seconded by Alderman Black. Okay, if you'll go ahead and vote on the item, the consent agenda as amended. Alderman Matthey?
Affirmative.
Okay. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Okay. And we move, now I will turn to Alderwoman Bray for item 7A in terms of the minutes.
So in reviewing the minutes, the last section of the minutes contain an area called Alderman comments. And as we know, we participated in some robust comments and some exchanges of ideas. Those are not reflected in the current version of the minutes. And so my suggestion is that we strike this item from tonight's agenda for revisions that are more reflective of the exchanges and bring that back at another time. Thank you.
Okay. Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
So you're
My
saying
motion
you want to approve the minutes with the exception of the summary of aldermanic comments?
I'd like to, my motion is that we strike 7A from tonight's meeting, and we take a pause and an opportunity to go back and review carefully the minutes from the February 12th meeting and bring those back at another meeting in the future. Thank you.
So are you asking the alderman to bring this back? I'm just clarifying, or the city clerk or the city clerk?
So I'd ask that we have opportunity to review and give some revisions to the clerk as well as to the interim city manager, revisions in this one particular section that are more reflective of the exchanges and perhaps in other areas as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Alderman Sage. Any comments?
Can I
Alderwoman
ask
Burr.
just a question?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you were looking for, Alderman Bray. So the minutes as they stand are a general overview of comments. They're not terribly specific, which is our standard practice. Are you asking that we change our standard practice to be more specific, or do you believe that the current summary is in any way inaccurate?
Thank you for your question, Alderwoman Burgess. The latter. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Are you okay? You had a puzzled look, Madam Clerk.
I did. Alderman Bray, would you like to have the mayor's comments added as well as the automatic comments added to the minutes to be more reflective of that meeting?
So I'd like us to have an opportunity to step away and study what these alderman comments are supposed to represent, which would be accurate statements about the exchange. I don't find that they currently do that. So I'd like them to be pulled from tonight's meeting and everyone have an opportunity to review them and perhaps submit their own comments of what was exchanged and then we bring them back at a future meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Any others? Okay, all right. Go ahead and vote on this. An aye is in favor of the motion to reconsider the minutes. Alderman Matthey?
Affirmative.
Okay. Oops. Okay, the motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. All right. And then you also had item 7I.
So for item 7I, I just had a few questions about this particular item.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. So in this initiative, or this recommendation, there is a purchase of some new golf cars and carts for the Prairie Vista. Is that correct? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. Now, does this represent all of the carts? Are we replacing all carts or just a portion of them?
All of the carts.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, all of the carts.
Okay. And then, is there a belief that in replacing with new, are we going to up fees because we have a new and improved experience, or maybe explain a little bit about what fees might look like?
We actually just increased the cart fee just last year to try to start to get some money for this purchase. There's no plan now to increase that for this coming year, no.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, is there a plan to sell the old carts? Do they have some residual value, salvage value?
Yes, ma'am. The carts will be traded into the Coker family, and they will be giving us an allowance of $132,764.60 as a trade-in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Those are my questions.
Any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
Actually, Mayor, I had a question on that one as well.
Oh, sure, of course.
So,
Matthew, yeah.
According to our packet, we have an option to replace the batteries in the existing carts for $51,000 or replace all of them for $155,000. And is there more to this? Why we're making the choice to spend that extra $100,000? I'm just looking for some clarification here.
The batteries are just part of the equation. The carts themselves right now are 6 years old, and other components are also starting to fail. And with that large amount of money going into those, it really forces us to keep those longer than what we would want to. And we would see other expensive things like controllers, tires need to be replaced. Other things would really start to add up with that. So that was why the decision was made. The batteries are just a part of it, but other things are starting to go as well.
Okay. And so does that mean that it looks like we're upgrading from electric carts to gas carts as part of this move? Are we given to believe then that every 6 years or thereabouts we're going to have this same capital expense as recurring?
The plan right now with the gas carts is we could see a longer life expectancy into those, somewhere in the neighborhood, hopefully, of 8 to 10 years on those. Without the need to replace the batteries, we could then keep the carts longer.
Okay, that's the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point then, is there a motion on the floor? Alderman?
I will make that motion.
Motion to approve as presented?
Correct.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and vote. Alderman Matthey, how's your vote? How do you vote?
Affirmative.
Okay. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. All right. Now we move on to our regular agenda, item 9A, a discussion on various ordinances to amend Chapter 21 of the City Code. And we have 3 possible motions here. We start out, though, with a presentation by Mr. Karch on these, and then I will entertain either questions or motions afterwards. Mr. Karch, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So tonight we will continue the solid waste dialogue. The last council meeting on February 12th, the council directed staff to bring back multiple hybrid options, both including service level changes and fee increases, so that we can bridge the $1.2 million general fund subsidy. Tonight, all three of the options before you do provide for the bridging of that gap of the general fund subsidy. So that's one of the key things is, we tried to find the puzzle pieces so that we could have the three options, and we'll show you those in a second. But first, let me start off by talking a little bit about one of the components multiple aldermen were interested in, education. Very briefly, we have been making modifications to our solid waste website, and then a couple things that we talked about on the council floor of providing education so that how can you fit more, some of the bulk that is put on the curb really could fit into the cart. So we're working with Nora Dukowitz, our communications manager, on trying to develop some additional educational pieces on how we can better leverage our existing cart system to be able to partner with that. So we are trying to do some of that actively. And then I would like to highlight Michael Brown, the Ecology Action Center Executive Director, is here with us tonight. He'll be making a presentation in just a little bit on a separate item, but would like to highlight our partnership with the Ecology Action Center and put an emphasis on a new app that is out there. It is a recycle coach. You can go on Apple or iTunes or your favorite Android site and be able to download that app. You can find out when your service would be provided at the curb, what you can recycle. There's a good amount of data out there for you. And again, while we still mail out and we don't anticipate on changing that on an annual basis, our calendar information, it is a wonderful tool from technology standpoint that we have out there. Tonight, we want to highlight all of the ordinances before you tonight. Take into account some of these following things that we would be looking to do in the next few years. Leveraging some of the global positioning system, GPS on our different trucks. We're looking to do some route optimization to relook at our existing routes. Maybe even having to change some of our current days in which collection is done. Those are major endeavors for a community. But are there opportunities? We have to look at that. We have to try to find that. We want to try to leverage other technology in this next year for whenever we have new substitute drivers that might not be used to a route. That might be helpful. If we look at on-call demand for service, those routing software would really be helpful. We'll also be looking at trying to leverage knuckle booms as a way to not replace the fleet in 1 year, but look for opportunities to add that to supplement. That one-person type collection system for maybe brush might be an effective thing. We can look at that. Roll-offs is another facet at our drop-off. We might be able to leverage some additional efficiencies in that area. And then we'd be looking to restructure and reclassify some of our existing staff so that we can better utilize the cyclical nature of the solid waste industry. There are times of the year where it's just very busy and we need extra staff, and then there's other times we might be able to put our employees more toward the needed street effort that we hear all about. And then the other facet I really want to highlight is low-income fee discount. There was an error in the packet that Ordinance 1 struck out the low-income fee section, and that is incorrect. The Option 1, Ordinance 1 in your packet, all of them include the low-income fee discount. That's an important clarification for you. Let me continue on. The other facet that we believe is very important is this ongoing 3%. We understand that can be difficult, but we want to highlight some facets of why that's important. Instead of coming back after a few years and trying to really ramp up fees, when they're done more slowly, they're less impactful. They also take into account the reality of our operation. We want to highlight the fact that we have multiple contracts. Our landfill disposal, it increases on an annual basis, 3%. We have our construction and demolition contract, which we'll be taking to the council within 60 days for another renewal. That also is looking to be an increase of a 3% on an annual basis. We have labor costs that on an annual basis increase. All of those aspects do continue to increase. The other facet to highlight is this is an enterprise fund. We've talked about that many times. It has never paid for itself. When the council takes action, and I'll make sure I clarify, when the council takes action and we have this general fund subsidy eliminated, you're just bridging a 1-year gap. There is no reserve fund. There's no accounting for the future with our equipment. We're still leasing equipment. Best management practice is to start building up your reserve once you purchase that to pay for cash instead of leveraging lease payments. So we're trying to make sure we also plan for the future. So those are the reasons why we think that's important. We want to highlight for you, we've heard the council that we will be looking to bring in the future some additional ordinances about how do we deal with landlords, some issues with potential landlords. I'm thankful for community development. They've been great partners. I actually think there's some really good opportunities for us to have some healthy dialogue moving forward. So we'd like to do that in a separate basis. I think there's a lot of dialogue that it'll take to go around that. I think we're going to need to interact with landlords to really have a good discussion on the issue. But I think we can look at that. We can also look at other aspects of our program that are more business related, such as trailer courts, mobile home units in the range above 4. There are many communities that don't serve those higher units, and there are some operational issues with those. Let's get into the ordinances. The three options you have before you tonight, the first one is that high service level, high fee increase. It's a flat fee. The flat fee system, we've told you before publicly, is $26. That would be for every cart, so every cart cost would be $26 across the board. That would mean if the council were to choose this option, there would be absolutely no changes in any of the service level that we currently have. Everything would stay the same as we have right now, bi-weekly for bulk, brush, and weekly for garbage. And so again, nothing would change with the drop-off facility as well. Ordinance number 2 is where we do have some changes to our service level, and we also have some fee increases, but not as dramatic in that way. So we're trying to balance that. The reason why we say it is not as drastic with some of the service level changes is we are offering free spring and fall collection of bulk waste with no limit of what you put out. But then the key is in January, it's not the spring. It's a very low cost for if somebody can't bring it to the drop-off for extended hours. At $25 for a bucket, that's really, we're trying to keep the cost significantly below what it would be our actual service charge if we were to do full cost recovery. So trying to balance that out of trying to encourage residents to do some of the getting something that hopefully you've got, not everybody has access to truck. Not everything can fit in a trunk. So if you don't have that ability, you can still put it at the curb for a reasonable price. Brush, there would be no change. We would be looking at the drop-off to extend those hours to try to make it more accommodating, more like longer into the evening. So it's better for people that maybe have that 9 to 5 type job so they can still take their material there as well. And that would be a $4 increase on the 65-gallon and the 95-gallon next year with no change in the 35-gallon and the low-income fee. We'll move on to Ordinance 3. Ordinance 3 is that one where we're having more impact to our services and we're having less increase in our fees. And so this would be the spring and fall pickup with the first bucket free, $25 per bucket after that. And outside of that, it is full cost recovery. If we go to your site, it'd be on demand. We would charge what it costs the city from a labor, equipment, disposal standpoint. We also, feedback from our employees that we see some value in, we think is some benefit for our brush. We would be looking at first and second bucket free, but anything over that for brush, many times our employees have found that's contractor work, unfortunately. Not always, but many times they're finding that might have been work done over the weekend or something to where that we maybe not, we didn't see that. But when you get to a whole tree line of brush, there's a lot of times that can be something beyond what a regular citizen could do. So we want to try to encourage more of that behavior for people to then start bringing, start paying for some of that cost. So, but 1 and 2 buckets is quite a bit of material if you've ever seen how much we can get in a bucket. This would have less fee increase of $3 and $3 for both the 65 and 95, again with no change in the 65-gallon cart, and as well as the low income fee. So we also wanted to provide the facet of the 2-shift collection for garbage and recycling. We call that split shift. Again, we'd have to really work out some of the details of that. And then we would also charge for additional recycle carts. Right now, we provide additional recycle carts at no additional charge. We'd charge for those additional recycle carts. But this would also include that free unlimited drop-off. With that, let's talk really briefly about the Town of Normal action. Currently, they are looking at some changes with some of their drop-off facilities, but that they are currently just evaluating that. They did implement some fee increases. You can see up on the screen that they are going in the future up to even $32 in fiscal year 22. That's really off the chart to the right. So they are increasing their flat fee structure system. So with that being said, we entertain any, with 16 seconds left to go, entertain any council discussion.
Okay. We have a motion or a council, Alderman Black.
Thank you, and thank you, Jim, for this information here. If you could go back to, yes, option number 2 there. I'd like to make a motion just to get the conversation started that we move to approve Ordinance 2 minus the 3% per year automatic annual increase. So everything in option 2 minus the 3% annual increase, and then I'd like to make some remarks after that.
Let's see if there's a second. Is there a second to that motion?
All right.
Okay, motion dies at a second. Alderman Burgess.
I would provide an alternative motion for option 2. Actually, why don't we just go down the line? Do we want to start at option 1? Anyone have a preference?
Well, if you're making a motion, go ahead. Start down the line with what?
You know what? Maybe I'll wait because I think we're all anxious to get it going, but I will wait to allow people to make some comments and then see where that goes.
Okay. All right. Alderman Black, you have the floor again.
So at this point in time, we've really dissected solid waste ad nauseum. I don't think that there's any more information. It's a political decision that we have to make here. And I want to advocate very strongly for option 2. Oh, okay. I'd like to advocate very strongly for option 2 for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a fair compromise piece. I think it captures what I think staff has heard the council say is let's find some efficiencies, but it also speaks to kind of the cost that we haven't really been able to address over the last few years. What I really like about option 2 is it does allow for that 35-gallon, $16 per month flat fee. And in my mind, if you are producing more trash, you should pay more for it. And we raised the fee on the water recently. That's going to be taking effect in May. We start talking about adding $10 per month to people who have the smallest cart who may not be producing that much garbage. Now, I'll hear stories about, the lids being open, et cetera, but I'm thinking at a higher level at this point in time. The first option I find very troubling because it is not a fair way of going about our solid waste program because you're having people who are producing less waste subsidizing those who are producing more waste. In a couple agenda items, we're going to be talking with the Ecology Action Center about our 20-year waste management plan, and we can look at every bit of data that tells us what we have to do is reduce the amount of trash that we are producing, period. We cannot make more trash. And I feel like a system in which every cart fee is exactly the same, those folks, why wouldn't I just get the biggest cart and just produce more trash? There's no incentive to recycle. There's no incentive to cut back. This, to me, is a fair compromise between both drastic reductions in service and not allowing for outrageous fee increases.
Okay. Alderman Sage.
Thank you. And Scott, I will say, too, I'm inclined to support or at least desire more conversation about option 2. But tell me a little bit about the rationale for the 3%, the revision of that, because I guess that was some of my reluctance in terms of perhaps seconding.
So the reason that I want to have the 3% removed at this point in time is that I want to come back 1 year from now, and it really forces us to look at those efficiencies as the service delivery that you've talked about. By having an automatic increase at this point in time, that may seem to the public as though we're not incentivizing us to find those efficiencies. And we can come back a year from now and put the automatic increase on 3%. I mean, 3% of $16 or even $29 is not a lot of money. But I want to show the public that we are serious about how we're going to look at our program to find every little nickel and dime, nook and cranny saving that we possibly can. And I think that taking that piece off for now is the way to do that.
Alderman Milowambwe, because you haven't spoken yet, and then Alderwoman Burgess.
Thank you. I understand your point, Scott, about the 3%, and I think I stated the same thing, I think when we talked about it about a couple of weeks ago, because I was worried about complacency and not to be critical of the staff, but I think we can have a tendency to think that if the money keeps coming, then, everything's going to be okay. So I guess, Jim, maybe you can talk to us about, and I wish I would have given you a heads up prior to this, but is there a particular number that you're trying to achieve? I don't want to increase things, fees for people, but at the same time, the idea of having a reserve so that we don't have to be operating in emergency mode all the time is appealing to me. So I'd like to know if there's a particular number that you're trying to achieve that would make you, I guess, operate more soundly.
Sure, and this is direction from our council, that enterprise funds should have a 15% reserve fee set aside, and that's the concern. And I appreciate and understand what you're saying. Even if you approve, whatever you approve tonight with the 3%, the goal for us is to increase efficiency so we can create that reserve fund. We can, and it will take us multiple years at that rate, even if we find multiple efficiencies and we save that money. It will take us a while, and we can revisit that. The council has full access to that every year on an annual basis. If the reserve fund and you don't see the efficiencies, that's where you have to hold, as a staff, hold me accountable for not coming through on what we're telling you we will do. But just personally, that's why we're asking for that, so that every year this doesn't become, just that solid waste churning. It allows us to have the ability to fix this from an efficiency standpoint and get those healthy practices in place.
Thank you. And another thing that I wanted to talk about, I think in our email conversation, it's a little bit difficult at times looking at the packet, trying to bring that out. So can you talk about the fact that, with motion 2, you're actually getting more value out of it?
Yes. Well, let's talk about ordinance number 2, the one that there's been some support for so far. So with this, one of the facets that there can be some benefit, and we'll have to see all of these options. It's difficult from a citizen behavior standpoint. I mean, we can throw these out there, but how citizens will respond, we'll have to see. And you can project that, but boy, those are tough to project. So with this issue, there are people currently who pay for bulk that is put out at the curb for more than one bucket. We have that in place now. For anybody who puts multiple buckets of bulk at the curb, they're paying $25 for every additional bucket. So in this case, there are some people that might be able to say, oh, I can wait for the spring cleaning until you come around in April, and then I can put those multiple buckets at the curb, and that works for me. I can be patient for that. Or in the fall, before the winter, I can go and do that clean out. People can then plan accordingly, and maybe for some, this is a way for them to be able to structure how they do their life, to be able to even save money from what they would do now. And then again, this was that trying to find the balance of, in between for those people who can't get it to the drop-off, keeping a reasonable price to pick up at the curb. We're just trying to encourage some of those behavior changes, trying to make it incentivize folks to come to the drop-off. And, some people know, hey, I've got a person down the street that I can go with them, and they've got a van or they've got a truck, and that's sometimes people will figure it out. People will figure out the best thing that works for them. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Alderwoman Burgess and then Schmidt.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't expect the 3% to get pulled from the motion, so I needed a moment to think about it and to listen for a second. So I have a couple of questions. Number one, is there a significant difference in cost to the city based on cart size?
The reality is the majority of the cost for us is not in the volume at the curb. The majority, the vast majority, I wish I had a percentage, but I would guess very high, is just to get to that point. The actual collection of the cart, it doesn't cost that much more from a plastic standpoint to make a bigger cart. The disposal material of the cart size isn't that much more from a weight standpoint. So really the issue for us is getting to the point. So that is a reality for us.
Alderwoman, I'm sorry, you start.
I have a couple of questions.
Of course.
Okay. Number two, what year was this made an enterprise fund?
2011.
2011, and it's in 2018, so 7 years. It's never actually done what an enterprise fund is supposed to do.
It's been fun, yes.
So don't sugarcoat it. So my concern is, so number one, with the 3% proposed increase, you were talking about costs we have no control over. All right, so efficiencies we can't capture. So the landfill disposal cost, I mean, I'm guessing that we have no ability to make that process more efficient. So that is a cost that's going to go up. I think you said on average 3% per year, regardless of what we do. Is that correct?
That's contractual. That's correct.
And it sounds like with the contract for construction and demolitions, something similar.
We're anticipating a 3% increase to bring to the council within 60 days. Yes.
Yeah. So we go with the lowest bid, but traditionally there's been a 3% increase per year in the cost of that. So while I'm very sympathetic and think that we always need to be looking for efficiencies, I think that those pressures will continue to be there because of what else you said, in that we don't have a fund balance. We don't have the things that we need for capital improvements, and we need to start building that. I would suggest that the 3% is a necessity at this point in time to, number one, make sure we aren't back here next year having the same debate. Maybe it wouldn't take another 7 years. But if it did, it would be a disservice to the residents in our community who want us to have a balanced budget. I know others want to talk, but I'd like to go ahead. It sounds like we're moving in the direction. Let's go ahead, and I would like to make a motion to approve the motion as presented for Ordinance 2 as presented.
So the way that your motion differs from Alderman Black, just to clarify, is that your motion would include the 3%
correct
increase
with the 3%.
as presented. Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second that, Mayor.
Okay. Seconded by Alderman Matthey. All right. So we have a motion on the floor, and we have other people who want to speak. Alderwoman Schmidt, and then Bray.
Thank you. I want to share that I've received some comments regarding ordinance number 2 that people may choose, in fact, to gather things around their yards and garages that they, to avoid that $25. And I, as you said, we can't control behavior, but I think that's a concern that,
we do have enforcement. That's one of the things that I'll tell you, from the benefit of talking to Bob Mart, our interim community development director, there are some mechanisms in place. I think we do need to bring back to the council some additional enforcement modifications in our code that I was very impressed. They had some good ideas. I think we need to be bringing this back to the council and have some additional dialogue. But that's one of those that I think we can try to make some changes in our code to help accommodate that.
I'm glad to hear that. I am not going to support an ordinance with an automatic 3% increase. I think your reasons are very compelling for why we need this and why we want to build a reserve, but at this point you're also going to be bringing forward to us some other modifications that have to do with landlords and changes in bulk waste for, I don't remember exactly what they were, but it seems to me that we shouldn't just assume that we're going to build that reserve on the backs of our residents, and that maybe we ought to be making some efforts to build some reserves from our overall structure that includes proposals we have not even had a chance to evaluate yet. And so maybe when you're beginning to price that, some of the bulk waste for landlords, for example, you might consider that in your calculations. So I think that there are many other ways that we might get to that reserve, and I think that we need to get that first year underneath our belts and really understand that we've balanced this, we're paying for what we need to pay for, and that we may in fact have an overage. So I'm very uncomfortable just automatically saying, yeah, 3%, because that's a lot to swallow. I really appreciate all the work you put into this.
Okay, Alderwoman Bray, Painter, and Howman.
Thank you, Jim. So a couple questions and then some thoughts. So when we're looking at the factors that actually make up the costs of our collections, it would be fair to say that it's the labor and the equipment that are driving our costs, not how much I put in a trash bin. Would that be correct?
It's true, but it is what we have always done with our program is we've always tried to encourage and incentivize. Whenever we started, we encourage recycling, and that was one of the reasons for the tiers. So you are correct. That's the main driver, but we do always want to encourage that recycling being the foundation of what we do.
So the labor costs are fixed because we have our public works folks on the trucks going down the streets, regardless of how much trash is in that bin. They've got to be present. They've got to be paid. So that's a big driver for cost. And then secondly, the equipment, another big driver, having the trucks and the like. So that the concept that it's based on volume, I kind of reject that. I really don't think that's the driver for our costs, and I don't see this as a user fee correlation problem for us to solve. I see it more as a flat fee problem for us to solve, because everyone benefits the same by having their trash collected and by having a clean community. And then finally, I'd like to say that I think we should incentivize cleanliness and clean community by encouraging folks to continue to put out the trash and have the trash removed regularly. I've lived in other communities where you did not have bulk included, and unfortunately there were dump sites that began to kind of grow up around the community, and you come out one morning and someone has dumped on your property, and it creates conflict in neighborhood, and it's not attractive. So as I look at this flat fee, I'm finding that I'm more favorable to Ordinance 1, and when I see the flat fee at 26, and you share a side-by-side community with us that fees are going to look very similar, that is looking to me like something that probably matches just what these costs really are and the fairest way to distribute it. I'm still debating the 3%, because perhaps we can build some efficiencies here, so that's kind of where I'm landing right now in taking a look at this.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Painter and then Howman.
Thank you. I'm considering motion 1 as well. I think that it is fair for everybody to pay the same amount for our trash pickup. I also know that when we considered privatizing, most everybody that I heard from loved our garbage service, and they want to have bulk collection every other week. And I just, I think the 3% is a bit much. I would not want to have that on the motion. So anyhow, that's where I'm landing on this. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Hellman.
Thank you. I'm vacillating between the 3% and not 3%, but given our history with wages going up every year, 2.5% to 3%, we're going to be coming back asking for at least 3% each year, just based on salary increases. So I'll support the motion 2 as it stands reluctantly, because we just approved Lake Bloomington getting privatized trash collection.
Alderwoman Bray, did you want to? Oh, okay. Okay, Alderman Black, and then we do have a first motion on the floor.
And I won't take too much time here. I just, as we vote on this, and I would like to just add a piece that maybe 1 year from now, we mark on a committee of the whole that we talk about how this program is working. Is it doing the things that we think that it's going to be doing? Is it going to be, are we seeing our neighborhoods, people piling up trash in their yards? Are we seeing these sorts of things happen? And if so, then we make the adjustment. We've crept up on this problem for far too long. I'd like to see us take action and go forward from there.
Okay. Oh, Alderwoman Painter and then Burgess.
I'd also like to remind everyone that the 3-tiered system was one of the ways that we all fell apart on our efficiencies the first time we went through this. And we have asked the garbage department for efficiencies and not received them. I would like to double down on making sure that they do what they say or they've been asked to do. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Alderwoman Burgess.
You know, as I listen more, I regret having made a motion earlier because I'm hearing that there appears to be more support for option one, and I think it would be fair to have the initial vote.
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
what we could, unless the maker and the
'Cause I'm in
seconder,
a
which is
position-
you and
yeah.
Alderman Matthey, agree to an amendment to that, the current motion is,
Yeah, which I made.
that you made, that Alderman Matthey seconded, is to support ordinance 2 as presented with the 3%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've heard a couple people say that they're in favor of a flat rate, but it seems to me, well, however proceed.
Mayor, if I could add something?
Yes, absolutely, Alderman Matthey.
So to me, the ordinance option number 1 there, I feel like that, Jim said something that really struck home for me, which is there's no incentive for recycling in that particular ordinance at all. If it doesn't matter, if everybody's paying the same rate, why do we even have smaller carts? Why even bother with that? Why make any effort whatsoever to recycle the greater purpose or the greater portion of your household waste and try to get that taken care of? While I'm sympathetic to concerns about the $25 per bucket pickup charge as well, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in past years it was reported that our actual cost per bucket is somewhere in the neighborhood of $125.
Yeah, that's probably right around that range if we were to just to get to the site, and that's correct.
So, at this point with even this minuscule $25 charge, we're actually only asking residents to cover 20% of our actual cost to deliver that service. And I mean, that seems more than generous to me. So, while option 1, I don't know, that option 1 just sits wrong with me. Okay. And then in regards to options, the 3% automatic increase, I mean, how many countless hours have we spent talking about trash? And even before I was on the council, how many hours in the last 5 years have been spent talking about trash as opposed to other directions and other places we could be trying to move the city forward? We spend so much staff time and so many thought hours dealing with waste disposal that there are other bigger picture concerns, I think, that we can be worried about on how to better optimize other city services, on how to increase transparency for our citizens, and how to better engage our citizens, as opposed to keep talking about the same subject over and over and over again.
Okay. All right. We got the. Did you want to respond to that, or change a motion, or because I'll go to?
Well, I hadn't finished talking from before, which is fine.
I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Well, that's okay. I mean, if you don't mind, if I could just make a quick comment.
You got the floor, and then Alderman Milwaukee.
I think Alderman Matthey makes excellent points. So all I will say is I think it's time to get it done. I support the motion I made, but if it fails, I will probably support the next one.
Okay. Alderman Milwaukee, on that cheery note.
Yeah, thank you. And I think Amelia kind of gets to what I was trying to say, is that I don't think we'll find a perfect solution, out of the 3. I mean, I try to find there's something in each one that I like, but there is enough in the 2 that I don't like that I'm not willing to support those. So, for example, motion number 1, as Jamie stated, really does not incentivize people who to produce less trash, in my opinion. Even in number 2, I don't like the fact that we're getting rid of people being able to just put trash out, at the curb, bulk waste at the curb, and have it be picked up. And I wish we could do some of that in motion two, but it looks like it's not going to be possible. And I also don't want to tinker too much with what staff has offered. Let's just go with it, because I think especially I know that we don't do so well when we try to tinker with things on the floor. That's been my experience being on the council, and that's why we've been at it for 6+ years. So I would like to move forward once and for all, and have Jim promise us that he will not come back with more trash talk.
Oh, please.
Okay. We'll go to Alderman Sage.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Again, I will, I think, align myself with what I've heard Scott suggest, and that is, I'm willing to support motion 2, but I get a little concerned that just adopting the 3% puts us on some kind of a trajectory right away where I'm not sure we're going to be as mindful for finding some of those efficiencies that I think we're going to find. I think that's a good point. I think the better point is the one that Karen made, and that is there are other recommendations coming back. In addition, addendums to the solid waste program on issues like landlord cleanouts, some of those other more costly aspects of this. And again, I feel like we benefit when we see more of what the total cost benefit analysis of this is. And so not being able to see that and being interested in what you're going to come back with some additional ordinance enhancements, I'll be supporting number 2 without the 3% and voting for the motion, or voting against the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, given what Alderman Sage has just said, and I think he kind of actually in many ways summarizes a little bit of the conversation here, although obviously we've got many moving parts. We have a motion on the floor that is as presented that does include the 3%. If that does not receive 5 votes, before we get rid of option 2, it seems we've got the other moving part of actually Scott's original motion, which was option 2 without the 3%. And then if that doesn't get 5 votes, then we can move on. All right, so at this point, we're voting on a motion, and the motion is as presented under number 2. It includes all of the items, including the 3% regular increase, which some were in favor of and some were not. If you would go ahead and vote on that, please. Alderman Matthey?
Affirmative.
Actually, that motion passes 6-3. Okay? There are 3 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Sage, Alderman Painter, and Alderman Schmidt.
Okay. All right. I want to, we have some puzzled looks on people's face, but after 7 years,
Can we adjourn the meeting?
In the wilderness.
Let's adjourn.
Congratulations,
Let's adjourn.
Council. Pardon me?
I say let's adjourn right now.
Well, we have other business. But this is, I think we were all stunned. Actually, I'm quite stunned. We've got some claps in the audience, probably, for one of the first times ever. Okay. Bye-bye trash. We move on to letter B, presentation of proposed budget by interim city manager Steve Rasmussen. We have a brief presentation and Scott Rathman, and then a brief council discussion. There is no action here. This is just for informational purposes only as an update on the budget. That correct, Steve?
That's correct, and of course we appreciate any input you may give. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor and Council, and I'm pleased to announce that I can now present to you a balanced budget. Okay, the first thing I want to do, I'd like to talk about the calendar again, and as you can see, the time is marching on there. Today, I'd like to consider the possibility of doing a potential council work session. We talked about March 10th, but we did a doodle poll on that. And Scott, can you pass that out?
I'm not going to ask you for comment on that now, but by the time we get to the end of my presentation here in about 10 minutes, we can take a look at it. If the council would like to have a Saturday work session, we've done a doodle poll, and you see the numbers there. And we, of course, stand at your service to do that on whatever day you might want to do. I just put that out so that we can talk about it. If you'd hold that then in reserve until we get done, and you can decide where you would like to go with that. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go to the next thing, which is the proposed budget highlights. Two things we have here is we have a balanced budget by doing a combination of the council targeted items. Those were the items that you suggested we look at when we had our November 4th retreat, and I'll go through that in detail. We were not able to get the entire amount, and so we went back to the individual departments, and we got some additional cuts, which I will talk about that as well. We also have nearly $26 million in capital improvements, which are incorporated into that, and much of the way we did that was by going back and making sure we cut enough out of the departments to ensure we had enough for capital improvements. And when I say we went back and cut out things from the departments, to a large degree, each department comes back each year with requests for increased funding. And so when we go back and cut it out, what we've done is we have really as much not approved the increase as much as we've cut it out. And much of that is what allows us to do the capital improvement that are in the budget. And I would like to call these the operating capital, because they're those things that we will continue to do as part of the operational budget. And I want to differentiate that from the 5-year capital improvement. Those are those big projects that we talked about, and we'll come back to you based on your guidance last week in a month or two, and we can talk about the capital improvement plan. These capital items are the ones that are incorporated into the department's operating budgets. And then the bottom line there, of course, is the general fund balance remains a projection at 15%, which will be 15.8. We keep that for emergencies to make sure that we have our proper bond rating, and we can also use some of that to make adjustments on one-time basis as we go along from month to month, making sure we replenish it to keep it up at 15%. Okay, the next item here was the famous 2.9%. In the 2.9%, we were able to close that gap here. And so if you go down to the second chart there, you will see how we did that. Those council targeted items are cost recovery, and that has a lot to do with recovering the fees for our service that we provide. We have some business registration in there, and that will come back with some details on it. We have some parking that we can adjust, and there, of course, is $1.1 million in solid waste. And then we have vacancy savings, and I'm going to go through that again in a little more detail. And then those departmental operating costs that I talk about, $775,000. That made up the difference to the $2.9 million. Okay, now here's the way that looks, and you've seen this chart before. One of the reasons we came back and talked about solid waste today is I have gotten from the council that you did not want to put in the $1.1 million in solid waste until you saw what it looked like. Tonight we saw what it looked like, and now we've got it in there. Those three items up above there, though, are flexible. In other words, cost recovery fees, $225,000. We'll bring that back to you, an ordinance here in a month or so that shows what that is. Well, there's, I think, and Bob can, I think there's 800 fees in there, and there's more if we can include the police department and the fire department. So, for example, we charge $25 for fingerprinting. Okay, maybe we're going to charge 30, or maybe we lower it to 15. Well, there's a whole bunch of things in those fees that we'll adjust, and you will all get a chance to take a look at them, but it's about $225,000 more or less. But that isn't as critical to look at each of those hundreds of fees as it was to look at the one big issue on solid waste. We'll bring that back to you. Same thing on a business registration program. That is an issue that is important for identifying economic development trends It's important for public safety, and so it is not just simply a money grab, but what happens, it allows us to do a number of things and recover much of the business that we do already that costs us money. Now, what will happen is we'll come back to that again. Maybe that's $100 for 2,000 businesses. Maybe we do it every year. Maybe we don't do it every year. But what happens, we'll come back to you as you directed last week with an ordinance in that, and that number, of course, fluctuates as well. Parking, we came back with $400,000 the first time. When we implement our new automated parking, if we charge parking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we could get $400,000 out of it. Well, there was some reluctance to do that. We cut it back to $200,000 because we maybe would have free times in times that we want to promote the downtown businesses. And then when we went back, we did a careful scrub on it. I think we came out with $140,000. We came back to $100,000. But that's variable because it's kind of about that, but you will have an opportunity later on to tell us how often do we want to charge, how much do we want to charge, and we can do that because we've got an automated system. So when we put that number in, it's about right. When we come down to vacancy savings, $500,000, well, we're going to look at every position that we have to come in, and some of these positions we may not need to fill. Some of them we will need to fill, but that amounts to only about 30% of the vacancies. We'll fill 2/3 of the vacancy, but the HR department and I will look at that. I get it. Just by the way, I get a Munis note on my computer to approve a new position. It's easy for me to click it and say approved. I went back to HR today and said, oh no. Right now, every one of those, you're going to have to come and talk to me about it because we're going to look at every one of those positions now. So before I click that button, we're going to know exactly why we're getting it, and we're going to try to look at how we can save it in personnel and still provide the amount of services that we need. So that's how we got down to that number near $2.9 million. But I got down to the bottom line there, which is the department operating cuts. We were still $775,000 short. So how did we get there? Well, I've given you a breakdown there which shows you what that is. And by the way, if you'd like a further breakdown on that, it's in your packet. But for brevity here, I just want to show you those because some of those are in there, and you're going to look at some of those and say, how are we going to cut some of those things out? In fact, where is our Assistant Fire Chief? Assistant Fire Chief Vaughn, why don't you come up here? So I'll just show you, and you can ask me these questions if you'd like, but you take a look at that and say, $285,000 in fire, how are we going to cut that out of overtime and professional development? Well, there's an answer to each one of these questions. I'm going to ask Assistant Chief Vaughn to ask that question. I'm going to ask him the question that you're going to ask him. Go ahead.
I am so glad you asked that question. I've been trying all night to come up here and answer. You were gracious enough in the last budget to provide us with funds to hire 6 additional firefighters. That is a program that we are currently working on. When we become full staff, and we're still working towards that in establishing tests and so on and so forth, that will allow us to bring that overtime down. Now, as far as professional development, what we're looking at is really reducing a lot of the training that we've been going out to do. We're going to bring that in and make it homegrown. We've got a lot of talent within the department that we're going to be using a lot more of. Our hope with that is as we hire these individuals, we're really going to take a strong look at the training that they've already been coming in with. And if we don't have to send them to a fire academy, and we can do that in-house to get that same certification levels, we're going to attempt to do that the best we can. So we're really looking at some creative ways as far as professional development. As you know, we are a very training-centric department, and but we're really trying to come up with some entertaining and innovative programs.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. And I asked Assistant Chief Vaughn to give you that example because Scott Rathman, our budget director, and I have been going back to the departments and doing this with each one of them, and we'd be happy to answer each one of those. But I wanted to give you an example of how that might work in one, and that's how we managed to get that $775,000, which then clears the $2.9 million deficit. I also want to make a note that is important, and that is $2.9 million doesn't seem like a big deficit if we're talking about a $200 million budget. Why are we struggling with that? Well, it's interesting because if you go back and you look at $200 million budget, if you look at $100 million in the general fund, how much of that do we really have any control over? Not much. In fact, it's about 5%, maybe 7%. It's hard to believe that that much money is committed and we don't have much say on it. But we don't, and it's because much of it is committed and we don't have any strength over it. I remember when I was, my first job in city government was an assistant to the city manager like Melissa has, and I asked the same question. I couldn't believe it. I said, we can get more money than that, surely. The old-time city manager said, no, you can't, 5%. So he gave me a little job, and so for 2 weeks I went out, I went through line by line in every department's budget, and you know what I came up with? 5%. That's about all you have control of. And I'll give you an example of this. We can go through many of it, but for example, we have $9.2 million in state motor fuel tax. Well, great. Well, how about using some of that? Well, you can only use a state motor fuel tax on state road and bridge improvements. Well, like what? Well, like Fox Creek Road, for example. Well, even if you wanted to go out and change that, which we don't want to, there's $7.2 million that we have no control over because it's committed to those state funds, and we can only use the state funds on that. So when we go back through a budget of $100 million, you've only got maybe $7 million. Scott came out with $7 million. I looked at $5 million, but that's about how much we have with funds that we have some discretion over. So when you look at $2.9 million, $3 million, that's about half of all of our discretionary funds. And so going back and looking at that and taking these things out, we've taken a great deal out of the funds that we have discretion, and the vast majority of the budget is really committed to those things like Fox Creek Road, so we really can't go back and take a look at it. The ones we can look at, we looked at them very hard, and we got $3 million out of it.
Okay. At this point, so you're not asking for any direction necessarily, just presentation, reaction, and questions tonight. Is that
right?
Correct?
And what I'm showing you this is because this is what we're going to build into the budget when the finance department goes out now and prints the books. And so we would want any comments that you may have, and then we'll come back in the adopted budget and we'll make the necessary adjustments to it. But I'm just showing you now how we came up with a balanced budget.
Questions, comments of Mr. I'm sorry, I was assuming you were finished.
No, I agree. It sounded like a conclusion. I appreciate it, but I had 2 more slides.
Oh, you have 2 more slides. Okay, sorry. You got 2 more slides.
Okay, great. And this is one you'll have seen in the newspaper, and that is that, and I do need to make an explanation on this, because what happens is you see that in FY 2018 last year, we had a $214 million budget, and this year we only have a $207 total budget, so we have an increase of $6 million. I've been asked, where did that $6 million go? Because what we've said is we had a status quo budget. The amount of money we're taking in and the amount of money we're spending out was the same this year as it was last year. And I wanted to explain some of that because it's accounting. It's municipal accounting. And again, I'll give you one example of that, and we could go through all of the $6 million. But if you look down under the line, you'll see there from 2018 to 2019, you'll see the number that says $2.2 million use of employee health insurance for capital, one-time use of fund balance. And I wanted to explain to you how that accounting works, so when we say we have the same budget as we did last year, you'll understand it. Well, what we did was last year we took $2.2 million out of the health insurance fund because we had it there that was a little bit excess of what we needed to keep in that fund, and we wanted to use it for some capital projects. So what happens, we essentially took it out of one pocket and put it in another, but the way municipal counting goes is when you take that money out, it has to count as revenue. And then when we go back and spend it, it has to count as expenditure. So it looks like it's $2.2 million more than we did. The real amount was it was zero-sum gain. And you'll see each of those, and Scott and Patty could go through and explain all of the $6.2 million. But I just wanted to give you an example of that so that when we say that we have the same budget this year we did last year, we took in about the same number of real dollars in taxes and fees that we had last year, and we put the same amount out in expenditures as last year. It just looks like it's $6 million less, but it isn't. It's the same as last year, and that's just accounting. And we can explain that to you if you need to take a look at it. So now, having said that, I've gotten through all of the slides that I wanted to, and I talked to you about those items, and I would now encourage you to look back in the additional items we had if you have any more items that you'd like to talk to us about, and I'd welcome any comments you may have.
Just one question on the Moodle poll or Doodle poll. What are the next steps? We have one date. The 2 aldermen still could not make it. What are the next steps with that, Steve?
Yes. What we're really asking is which dates you would prefer, because we did not get answers from
We did not have one where we had all 10. I
I
think we had one with 7. Okay. All right. We will try to work that out. Okay. At this point, questions for Mr. Rasmussen.
You said you had 2 more slides. Is that you're done?
Well, I will give you one more.
Oh, you just said you were done again. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm hearing things I'm not.
The only one I wanted to have, I said I had 2 more because I wanted to show you the slide on the total capital funds. I said I had a total of about $26 million that we're doing the funded capital projects in the capital budget. That is not the budget that is the 5-year capital improvement plan. This is just the what I would call the general operational capital projects, and that's where those $26 million, and includes a number of those that we've talked about, like if you look up at one of your favorites, the third one down is state motor fuel tax, $9.2 million, in which is Fox Creek Bridge.
Yeah. Thank you for all the clarification on the Fox Creek Road project.
Okay.
Correct.
It's a great example. It's a
Pretty
great
much
example.
totally clear on that at this point.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I answer any questions you may have now?
Alderman Sage.
Thank you. Maybe more a couple comments. And Steve, you alluded to this, but again, I think this is something that you say more than once. And that is when you were talking about some of the restrictions that are placed on motor fuel tax, it's almost a derivative of a larger issue. And this is one thing that I appreciate Melissa has done exceedingly well with our priority-based budgeting, and it is identifying how much of our expenses are related to mandates, state mandates and federal mandates, where I oftentimes will hear from folks and they'll say, well, you just don't do that. That's silly. We ought not do that, and it's with some fluff industry like or a department like the EPA or something where they say, well, we're just not going to do that. And we've seen examples, here in central Illinois where it doesn't work out well if you don't abide by EPA decisions. So thanks for kind of reinforcing that again. And there's an educational opportunity there when you say we don't have discretion over large amounts of money, because a lot of these are mandated programs. The other thing I wanted to do was just give a shout out to the fire department, because as I was sitting here when the chief was talking about we're going to do some of this training in-house and stuff, I was reminded too that a couple of years ago we spent money on some technology upgrades that allowed training to be done in the firehouses, fire stations, instead of sending firefighters out to some remote locations for training. And so again, that's just a trend. I was reminded that the fire department is like so many of our departments. They do look for some ways to reduce their cost, and
Yes,
developing the in-house training just builds on the technology changes that were implemented a couple of years ago. So thank you.
And in light of that, when we come back here in a month or so, and we talk about the capital improvement program, we're going to go through all of those. They're the things that we call our donations. They're the things that we call our consultant fees, and we'll look at all of those for potential cuts in order to fund some of the capital improvement programs. And that's one that we're coming back to you and IOU.
Alderman Black.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And I've really enjoyed this process of walking us through on these touch points many, many times and giving us ample opportunity to provide feedback and also have the public weigh in on some of these things. I feel as though because we're so engaged in this process, we're ultimately come out with a better budget at the end of this process. And I hope we can use this as a model for future budget cycles. Just a couple of things that kind of come to mind here. I forget when it is, but we usually have our state legislator session with the city council, and it's always, we say hello, it's very nice. But perhaps staff could outline some of these mandated state laws that we could ask for support to either rescind or have the state take a look at. I think people are really surprised when they find out some of the things that we have to do by state law. And then it always helps when people come to us with things that they are very specific in targeting them. We can do some of the legwork for our state legislators to really hone in on things that will save us money in the long term. In addition, I know that the business registration fees is up there. I've had some concerns about that in the past. I'd love to get some, when we finally vote on that, the Chamber of Commerce potentially to weigh in on that, maybe in the form of a letter or some feedback from Charlie or somebody. I just want to hear what the feedback would be before moving forward. And then as I'm looking at this budget as a whole, too, I'm reminded of Bill Rao's comments about multi-year budgeting and how we kind of position ourselves. And a couple of years back, we talked about doing maybe 2-year budgets, 3-year budgets, so we're not constantly thinking very short and medium term. Is there a prohibition on multi-year contracts?
I'm glad you asked that question. We had a meeting just today where we talked about the energy issues and the long-term contracts. And there are some things that we have to do on a yearly basis because we only have a 1-year budget. So what we do is if we have contracts that last farther than that, it has a note that says, but it's subject to an annual appropriation by the City Council. So we do have to move forward that way.
Certainly, because I think at this point in time, no stone unturned should be kind of our motto, and anything that we can do to maybe save money in the long term with these multi-year contracts, if that's even a possibility, we should definitely consider exploring. I remember I took a walk with Jim through the Public Works building, and we talked about some of the spray hoses on the bottom of the trucks to get the salt off that increases the longevity of that equipment. Yeah, there's an upfront cost, but we save money on the back end. So I'm definitely interested in exploring those types of things because this budget cycle and this process can't end in April. It has to keep going.
Okay. Any other comments on this point? Okay, thank you so much.
In that case, I just want to leave you with these last thoughts, please, then, and then I will sit down. One of the things we need to do is we will manage the council targeted items aggressively because we need to get that $2.125 million as well as the $775 that I've talked about. The third item down, we are concerned about what might happen in the state of Illinois. There have been threats for a holdback on tax distribution, and also there may be a freeze on some funds, and so that may affect us as we go forward, and we will be watching that very carefully. The other item, at the next item down, says we must continue to work on reviewing controllable revenue sources to growing expenses, and Council has alluded to that a number of times down here. We have to control our revenue because there are expenses that are going to go up. As sure as the sun comes up tomorrow, there are going to be raises in costs that we're going to have to cover. And so we're going to watch our revenue sources that we can control against those expenses as we can. We also put up that operational cuts won't work in the long term. We've done some of that, but we can't keep doing that over and over and over again. We do have one of the goals that the councils give us as a sustainable budget, and so we will continue to work that. The last item, though, is the good news is we have a great staff, great council, great community, and we're going to move forward and be successful in all of these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate everything. Ending on a positive note. That's great. Under number D, or excuse, no, we don't have a, we're going to have to work on that. That's what I asked Steve, and we're going to have to keep working on the date. Until we can, decide on whether or not we still have a meeting in spite of the fact that we may not have a full council. And that's going to have to be our question. And that's something that we can, have to work on, I guess, going forward. Okay.
Yes, we will, unless the council wanted to suggest a date to us today, but we'll put that in whenever you would like.
Okay. All righty. Moving on to letter D, we have a 20-year materials recovery and resource management plan for McLean County, Bloomington, and Normal, Illinois, as requested by the Public Works Department. We have a brief presentation, and a very brief council discussion. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, members of the council. I know it's late. My presentation should be very short. And this all should be very familiar. We talked about this back in October. So just try and hit some of the highlights here. So of course, the Ecology Action Center, we are a service provider for the city, the town, and the county, acting as an environmental agency, nonprofit agency, providing resources such as solid waste planning, among other services. Jim kind of stole my thunder earlier with the Recycle Coach app. I wanted to highlight that here. Check it out at recyclebn.org if you don't already use it. So I'm here to talk about the solid waste plan, which has been in the works for about 2 years now. We have a good amount of data that's been collected and assembled over this past 2 years that's led us to this proposal. One of the major source data and most important variables here is the McLean County landfill, which is reaching capacity. You can see here on our chart that capacity dropping down very close here as we get into 2018. The most recent estimates look at August of this year that the McLean County landfill will reach capacity. So that is one of our big pieces of information. Of course, as well, recycling has been improving and increasing for decades, but while we have, in the past year or so, finally reached our community-wide recycling goal of 40%, things have been stagnated. If we look at the past 10 years or so, really we've only been hovering in that upper 30% range. And so really, to go further, we need to do more, and that's what this proposal does. We can as well look at the actual composition of our waste as it is being landfilled, a lot of this being recoverable material that we are literally right now burying it into a hole in the ground. A more detailed analysis of those materials, including those waste streams, including some very specific numbers on how much recoverable material that could provide some economic benefit that we are, again, burying in the ground. So within this new waste plan, we have 6 new priorities to try and identify these gaps, essentially, that are leaving so much recoverable material not recovered, and at the same time looking at ways that we can bring that to economic benefit instead. Commercial recycling being a big one, construction and demolition recycling, apartment recycling, food waste composting, otherwise known as organics recycling, a permanent household hazardous waste collection facility to build upon the great success that we've had as a community in hazardous waste collection. And then, of course, to support this all, it really is going to take more work, more outreach, more efforts to make it all happen. So we have gone through a public hearing process, public comment period, which is actually mandated by the state of Illinois for solid waste plans. Very overwhelming response in terms of the volume of responses we received. 48 written public comments. 47 of those in favor of the plan as written. 1 was in opposition. 8 verbal public comments at the public hearing, all in favor of the plan. A petition was submitted with 2,333 signatures in favor of the plan. So overall, we have 2,389 public comments submitted, 99.9% of those in favor of the solid waste plan. So to address one possible concern or question that may come up, as this has come up elsewhere, the inclusion of ordinances as a possibility within this plan. Keep in mind this plan is a vision. It is a roadmap. This plan is not binding on the city, the town, or the county. The ordinances that are included in here merely are suggestions and that are a possibility in order to help essentially improve the economics in terms of route density and volumes of materials to help keep everything cost effective. So big picture we're talking about these points. The landfill is closing. This solid waste plan is a proposal for the next 20 years to help us transition to essentially be a post-landfill community. This has been developed through a collaborative stakeholder process, looking at the needs for the future, bringing together stakeholders from waste, from recycling, from institutions, from local governments, from businesses, from nonprofits, definitely bringing together all of the best solid waste management experts in our community to come together to essentially come up with the best proposal we can for the most cost-effective strategies we can develop for the long term in order to put more of our resources and effort into economic development and stimulating the local economy and recycling business instead of sending our waste further and further away to be buried in the hole in the ground. So overall, this is consistent with, I think, the theme of this evening, cost-effective, responsible stewardship of our resources. So, any questions?
Questions of Mr. Brown? Alderman Sage.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Brown. Talk with me, because one thing I consistently hear, and you've alluded to it, but I guess I would encourage you to speak a little more specifically about kind of the I don't know if I'd call it a conflict, but certainly a conundrum between the mandates and voluntary participation, and the concern that I know has been expressed to me, and I'm not suggesting it's a prevalent majority. I'm just saying it's a concern.
Absolutely.
How do you see other communities? I mean, there has to be some methodology that they use to try and work through increasing voluntary participation long before they get to the point where Big Brother steps in and slaps mandates on.
And so in the plan, if you look at the timeline that's laid out actually in the front of the plan, it gives kind of like 5-year segments to the plan, quarterly kind of efforts. And within that, it does show that, yes, in most cases, we would be looking at, pilot programs, voluntary efforts, increasing kind of that technical assistance, the hands-on, trying to work with the rental companies in order to help increase that route densification and the volumes of materials, and maybe, working with them to help provide services and that middle ground between them and the waste haulers so that we can help deliver services to them in a cost-effective way, hopefully without any mandates. And so all of that is outlined in here that, yes, that is the preference in most cases here. And so on the other hand, the bigger picture, what we're talking about is economics, really. I mean, as we have to send our waste further and further away, and so the burden of that over the next 20 years, unknown, costs, and so this is about asserting cost controls into that process. We don't have as many, so the burden of those potential costs that are unknown versus the burden of some regulation, and so that's really what it kind of comes down to.
So I'm not trying to paint you into a corner, but I want to have a kind of a credible understanding here.
Yes.
And so would it be fair to say that we are some number of years away before there would be consideration given to mandates? We have a lot of other options that we're going to explore, we're going to look at, we're going to try, we're going to experiment with before the hand of government comes down on solid waste, right?
That is ultimately up to the council and the staff here. It's within the plan as an option. Town Normal, to be fair, is looking at such options right now. And so...
And thank you for that clarification. Would it be fair to say what I just suggested is the spirit of the vision that the Ecology Action is bringing to us?
We are not pushing ordinances anytime here in the near future.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Alderman Miller-Longway.
Okay, thank you, Mike. My question relates to energy production. I know we do produce quite a bit of trash, and I've had conversations with other folks I think who are here in the audience. Dr. Rao is one of them. And talking about the economics of energy production. So, I know it hasn't happened here yet, and I don't know how far away we are from that. Is it feasible? Is it something, personally, I'd like to see us pursue that, but I don't know what the economics of it are.
Right. And so you're talking about waste to energy, and that's a really big, broad topic that we could talk about for hours, especially if we've got some experts in here. And so that covers a spectrum of technologies that is everything from good old-fashioned incineration to, plasma electrolysis to anaerobic digestion. And there's all sorts of pros and cons all along the way. There's all sorts of, costs or benefits. And so what this plan does, it doesn't really suggest any of those specifically, except for it does, based on the traditional solid waste management hierarchy, it does discourage incineration and technologies that are close to that, because that really isn't very benefit-oriented relation to the cons. But it does refer to anaerobic digestion as something that we are interested in looking at in the future, and that has to do more with like your organics, your food waste, yard waste, things like that you can control the composting process, so you're capturing methane and using that methane for benefit or using that methane to generate electricity. And so those are technologies that are proven that do have, some revenue potential that we would like to look at in the future, but that's still a ways off.
What's a ways off? How far do you think?
It puts, I think, in the plan, I think we're looking at that in the fourth quarter of the timeline. So 15 years out, but that could be sped up or slowed down depending on, a number of variables.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you very much for this progressive roadmap. I am prepared to make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution for the 20-year Materials Recovery and Resource Management Plan.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Hellman. Any further discussion for voting? Okay, obviously, an aye is in favor of this 20-year plan. Alderman Matthey, did you have any questions or comments?
No.
How do you vote on this?
Affirmative.
Okay. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much. Okay. And we move on to item D, which is discussion on action on an ordinance implementing restrictions on video gaming terminals and setting a one-year moratorium on the addition of new terminals within the city. We have a very brief presentation by Mr. Juergens and a very brief council discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'll try to be even briefer. This is a continuation of our discussion from last week. This is an ordinance that implements licensing regulations on video gaming within the city of Bloomington. That's something new. We haven't done that before. These regulations mirror the town of Normal. However, they do not include a licensing fee based on the feedback that we received at the last council meeting. So there's no licensing fee. The penalties for violating the licensing are a little tougher than what the town of Normal provides, but we felt that that was necessary. Otherwise, it is pretty close to mirroring. This regulations also provide that there will be a one-year moratorium on the issuing of new video gaming licenses. This means that during this one-year period, city staff will be able to evaluate and come back to the council with recommendations on whether or not there should be a ultimate cap on the number of video gaming machines within the city, as well as whether additional regulations are necessary and whether there's any type of fee that should be considered by the city council. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on this. Or
just one quick question.
Yes.
Let's say that this didn't, if the council was divided but it didn't quite pass, hypothetically, I have absolutely no idea, but can the Liquor Commission recommend a license with the stipulation that they cannot have video gaming? Or is that not possible? Once you've opened the door, you're stuck.
Yeah, once you've opened the door. So it's our opinion that we need to have a structure in place within the city, some sort of licensing structure if we then want to implement any provisions on regulating those licenses. So there are a lot of communities within the state that have implemented these moratoriums. While they've seen kind of an explosion of terminals within their communities, and they'll put a stop on that so that they can take a step back and take a look and see what types of regulations are right for their community. But it's our opinion, if you're going to get in the business of saying whether or not somebody can have a video gaming terminal, first we need to have a license structure so we have some sort of mechanism to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Alderwoman Painter?
I think you were...
Well, this was your proposal, so I was
Right.
starting with you.
Well, I'm going to be in favor of this because even though last year we got about $750,000 from these gaming terminals, the net wagering activity, the money that was drawn out of our local economy was almost $16 million. So I don't really see an upside to these terminals at all. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
On that, I think that might be for a quarter. My understanding, it was more like around $50 million a year. Not just for Bloomington? But is that, okay, all right, thank you. I'm probably thinking about a different number then, yeah.
That's the amount played minus the amount won. So the net
Gotcha.
wagering activity that left our economy was almost $16 million.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Burgess, yeah, thank you.
So in general, I think more regulation is good. I think we all should be concerned about the proliferation of these devices within our community. I think that's a widespread question that needs to be asked. But I'm curious if perhaps, whether it's you, Jeff, or others on council, can explain to me why a moratorium is a desirable path forward right now. Because number one, it seems a little bit abrupt to me. And I'm sure there are many businesses in the process of getting up and running, and they had a business plan in place that they were trying to move forward with, and suddenly we say, oh, now there's a moratorium, and so I'm a little bit concerned that there will be a feeling that we've pulled the rug out underneath people there. And I don't have anything specific in mind, but I just contemplate it as a possibility because, again, this seems a little abrupt. And number two, the length of time of the moratorium. I would understand more a 3 to 6 month time period. Why do we need a year to look at this if we're just modeling regulations off of another community? I'm just curious.
Any comment on that, Jeff, from a legal standpoint?
No,
I mean, obviously, we're not asking you your policy opinion, but
right. No, just as to your first question, I think you're going to find that whenever you implement the moratorium, you're going to have people that were in the process or maybe thinking about getting in the process. We did work provisions in there that if they had a application in with the gaming board, that they could be potentially grandfathered in as well, along with everybody else that already has existing gaming terminals. So we did try and take that into account a little bit. The rest of it, as to the length of the moratorium, again, that's purely a policy decision. On the part of the council. And I've seen communities that have initiated moratoriums, they've extended them, it's really just a policy decision on the part of the council as to how quickly you want this to come back.
I would just say I personally would be more comfortable if we started out with perhaps a 3 or 6 month period with the option to extend it, because a year seems a little bit long in order to get everything in a row to move forward on this, because I think the pathway here should be relatively straightforward in terms of answering a few questions. Do we want to cap the total number? Do we want to use a terminal fee to reduce proliferation? It's a hard word to say. Or other options. So I think that's where I would fall. I would prefer that we shorten that timeline a little bit.
And Alderwoman Painter.
I would like them to make the motion that we have a 1-year moratorium on gaming machines and possibly consider extending it.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
And just for
Second
clarification,
by,
that's to approve the ordinance as written?
Yes.
And
Approve the ordinance as written, and so we have, just wanted to clarify, we have a motion and we have a second. Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Madam Clerk, you're good with that? You got it?
Just
Okay.
to point out, there was one typo that we would correct in there,
Okay.
under section 122, where we say this section 121 shall be automatically repealed on March 1, 2019. That should say section 122. We'll fix that. That was just a typo.
Okay, is that okay with the maker?
Yes.
Is that okay with the seconder? Yes. Okay. All right, at this point, there isn't any further discussion. If we'll go ahead and vote on this motion. Excuse me, I meant to Alderman Matthey, I keep forgetting. Did you have anything to say on this?
No, sir.
Okay, how do you vote on this?
Affirmative.
Okay. Whoops, excuse me. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk, so we have a moratorium on video gaming. Next, we move to item F, and as I understand it, though, Mr. Mart, is there a, you have a brief presentation, but there is an issue about voting on the plat tonight?
There's some concerns raised by Councilman.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Regarding the plat. So I've been asked to present the final plat for Circle K subdivision. It's located at the corner of Hershey Road and GE Road, and it's 1611 North Hershey Road. What you'll see is it's a 4.5 acre tract at the southeast corner of the intersection. Across the street is the Country Financial Building and the daycare to the south, and residential neighborhoods to the north. The zoning for the property was changed in October of last year from C2 to B2. The plat is in general conformance with the city engineering standards. There were some questions raised about setback issues on the plat. And I think what we could talk about this evening is there is provisions within your subdivision ordinance that does allow the city council to refer this back to the planning commission for interpretation, and that would be a recommendation that staff would agree with at this time. Just for some additional information on if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Questions of Mr. Mart. Alderman Black?
Thank you, Bob. So if we were to go down the path of sending it back to the Planning Commission, would that automatically trigger a public hearing process?
It's a legislative public hearing, yes.
Okay, so residents could provide feedback at that hearing. Okay.
Okay. Alderwoman Schmidt.
I just need you to repeat why are we sending this, but why might we send it back to planning?
There's some questions regarding the setbacks that were placed on the plat. That was a concern that were raised this afternoon by an alderman, and that's something that we could probably look at. And there's some interpretation issues. If you look at the way the plat is structured, it clearly says that it's not completed in this one section regarding the front yard setback along Hershey Road.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, so essentially our options are to approve it, to not approve it, or to send it back to planning.
That's correct.
Alderwoman.
I would like to make a motion to send it back to planning, to refer the final plat to the Planning Commission for legislative public hearing, and I would also like to require the submission of a preliminary plan, which was waived. So because of those two things, I'd like to...
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Alderwoman Burgess. Any further discussion? Mr. Matthey, Alderman Matthey, any further discussion on that?
Not here.
Okay. How do you vote on that?
Affirmative.
Okay. Okay, the motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And at this point, we move to City Manager's discussion.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Your Honor? We're not in a courtroom. I'm just happy when people don't call me four-letter words. I have nothing. Aldermanic comments? Yeah, at this time of night. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jamie. Good night.
Have a great evening.
I apologize.